The first thing Kayden Jensen noticed when he woke up on the alien medical vessel was how aggressively white everything was, like a dentist's office had collided with the inside of a light bulb. Then came the beeping, sharp, rhythmic, and entirely too close to his left ear. He sat up, groggy, blinking against the luminescence. A soft chime sounded overhead, followed by a voice that sounded like someone trying to hum and whistle at the same time. Patient Kayden Jensen is awake. Alert the triad. Kayden rubbed his face, then winced. His skin burned faintly, like the aftermath of a mild sunburn. He looked down at his arms. No visible rash, no injury, just clammy and pale. His head was pounding, throat a little dry. "Must have caught something," he muttered. A hatch hissed open to his right, and 3 tall figures entered. The tallest, draped in a flowing teal robe, approached him with what he assumed was a medical scanner. The other 2 remained back, whispering in their own language, tones shifting from low warbles to high chirps. "Human Kayden, you are experiencing a febrile reaction," said the robed one, holding the scanner close to Kayden's temple. Kayden frowned. "A what?" "A fever. Body temperature elevated by 1.3 degrees Celsius. Tachycardia present. Oxygen saturation slightly below norm. We must begin stabilizing protocols immediately." "It's just a fever," Kayden said, swinging his legs off the bed. "I'll sleep it off." The room went still. Even the beeping paused for half a second. "You will sleep?" the robed alien asked. Its voice held a tremble, like it had just witnessed a small animal declare war on a starship. "Yeah," Kayden said. "Drink some water, maybe nap. This isn't my first rodeo." "You are aware this condition can escalate to systemic failure?" "Not unless you let it. Seriously, just give me a blanket." The alien turned to its companions and launched into a frantic exchange. Kayden caught the words core destabilization, neural degradation, and containment chamber. The one in the back pulled out a tablet-like device, tapping through what looked like medical protocols. The middle one started assembling what could only be described as a full-body cooling exosuit. Kayden raised a hand. "I appreciate the enthusiasm, but back on Earth, we don't go DEFCON 1 over 100-degree fever. I'm tired. Let me sleep." The lead alien hesitated, then finally spoke. "Human immune systems are notoriously volatile and unpredictable. You may underestimate the danger." "I'm not underestimating anything. I'm saying I've had worse. I once worked through strep throat for a week. Just give me a blanket and some water." The alien looked genuinely horrified. Within minutes, Kayden found himself restricted to a reclined diagnostic bed, surrounded by softly humming machinery. A fluid bag was already connected to his arm, the tube containing a clear liquid that shimmered faintly with pink light. He sighed. "What is this?" "Hydroelectrolytic nutrient blend. It will support your system while we monitor the progression of your fever." "I asked for water." "That is included." The door opened again. This time a new figure entered, shorter, pale green skin, wearing what looked like a lab coat made from woven glass fibers. "I am medic veteran. I specialize in xenopathogenic immunology. You are Kayden Jensen, yes?" Kayden nodded. Veteran stepped closer, scanned his face, then picked up a tablet. "Your fever has persisted for 41 minutes. This is concerning." "It's not even that high," Kayden said. "We have analyzed over 70 case studies of human febrile states. In 21 of them, similar symptoms led to unconscious collapse within 6 planetary hours." "That's just dehydration or flu complications," Kayden said. "Not every fever is an emergency." Veteran stared at him. "You are still planning to sleep?" "That's the idea." Veteran turned around and scribbled something on his tablet. The other medics resumed whispering. A screen lit up beside Kayden's bed, displaying a rotating 3D model of a human body with red highlights around the forehead and chest. A low alarm sounded. One of the medics rushed to a panel and shut it off. Kayden groaned. "You're acting like I'm dying." Veteran replied, "We do not understand where your threshold for concern lies. You appear calm despite systemic irregularities. Are you concealing distress?" "No, I just know how this goes. I rest, I hydrate, maybe I feel like garbage for a day or two, and then I'm fine. The medics exchanged glances again. We cannot allow passive observation, said Veteran. We must initiate aggressive immune support. The exosuit returned. Kayden raised both hands. No suits. No chambers. Let me rest. If it gets worse, you can prod me with whatever alien tech you want. Veteran didn't look convinced. Still, he nodded once. Very well, 6 hours of monitored rest. Then we reassess. Deal, Kayden said, already leaning back. The light in the room dimmed slightly. A soft mist hissed from the ceiling, humid, not unpleasant. Kayden closed his eyes, exhaled, and let himself drift. He woke up 4 hours later soaked in sweat, muscles aching, mouth dry as sand. The fever had spiked. His skin burned, his head throbbed like a drumline was practicing behind his eyes. He tried to sit up and immediately regretted it. A chime sounded. Veteran re-entered within seconds, followed by 2 assistants. The room filled with the scent of antiseptic and something metallic. You are deteriorating, Veteran said, scanning his vitals. Heart rate elevated. Body temperature is 40.1 Celsius. You are not fine. Kayden coughed. Okay, fine, not ideal. You failed to predict the escalation. I've had worse. Statistically, you have not. Kayden winced as a pressure built behind his eyes. All right, I'll take the meds. Veteran nodded, administering now. One of the assistants injected a cool serum into the IV. Kayden shivered as it entered his bloodstream. The burning eased slightly, enough for him to breathe without wincing. Veteran leaned closer. If this does not stabilize you within the next hour, we must begin immune modulation therapy. Sound painful? Yes. Kayden closed his eyes. Let's hope it works then. The next 6 hours passed in a blur. Fever dreams, distant voices, cold compresses on his head, and the soft hum of machines. When he finally woke again, the burning had dulled to a low heat. Veteran was at his side, scanning his vitals. Better, the alien admitted. Still elevated, but no longer critical. Kayden blinked. Told you I'd sleep it off. You did not sleep it off. You endured a dangerous escalation and required pharmaceutical intervention. Still counts. No, it does not. Kayden sat up slowly. His muscles ached, but the headache had faded to a manageable throb. How long was I out? 12 planetary hours. You were semi-conscious for much of it. Kayden nodded. So? What now? We monitor. You remain under observation for another 48 hours. No strenuous activity. Fine by me. Veteran studied him. You frightened the medical triad. Didn't mean to. You calmly dismissed a symptom we consider a medical emergency. We are trained to react swiftly to any system destabilization. Humans just run hot sometimes. That is not comforting. Kayden gave a weak laugh. I guess not, but thank you for the help. Veteran inclined his head. We will continue to monitor your progress. Please do not attempt to sleep off organ failure in the future. I'll try to remember that. The alien left. Kayden lay back, eyes half-lidded, the faint rhythm of monitors lulling him into rest. The fever had broken. He wasn't fine yet, but he was better. And this time, he wasn't sleeping it off. By 3:42 p.m. the next day, Kayden had managed to shuffle down the corridor outside the med bay, under the reluctant supervision of a squat, six-eyed attendant named Kyrell, who glided beside him with what looked like a portable defibrillator cradled in translucent limbs. Hawking assists lymphatic recirculation, Kyrell said, trying to keep pace despite the fact that Kayden was moving like a man ankle-deep in molasses. However, if you experience syncope, I am authorized to deploy thoracic stimulants. If I pass out, just catch me. No need to jump straight to shocking my ribs. That is not protocol. Kayden leaned against the wall, inhaled slowly, and kept walking. The corridor curved upward, following the ship's inner ring. Every few meters, a panel blinked softly to acknowledge their presence, logging his vitals and movement. It felt less like a health walk and more like a parole check-in. 2 turns later, they reached a wide observation chamber where the ship's hull was entirely transparent. Beyond it, a gas giant with rings like stained glass, spinning silently in the void. Kayden stopped to look. Gurel hovered beside him. "Your pulse has increased. It's awe, not cardiac distress. Those are not mutually exclusive." Kayden laughed, then coughed. His ribs protested. "You're all wound tight." "Incorrect. I am uniformly gelatinous." A second laugh triggered a sharper cough, and Kyrell immediately extended a limb toward his chest. No poking." Kyrell retracted the limb, but the defibrillator glowed faintly now, like it was preparing to argue. By 5 p.m., Kayden had been returned to his room and was chewing through a meal that had the texture of rehydrated foam and the flavor of nothing at all. Veteran entered without ceremony, holding a new tablet and wearing a coat that now shimmered faintly at the seams. "You've been approved for soft activity," Veteran said. "No exertion beyond low-resistance movement." I walked a hallway. "You exceeded your monitored oxygen threshold 3 times. That's exertion." Kayden dropped the fork. "Do you have anything that tastes like an actual vegetable? I'd kill for a carrot." "We cannot simulate earthroot species. Their cellular structure is unstable under our protein synthesis methods." "What if I just chewed on a stick? Like wood? Would that be closer?" Veteran tilted his head. "You desire cellulose?" "No, I want flavor. And crunch. You've made everything into damp foam. Our nutritional priority is molecular efficiency. That's what makes it sad." Veteran ignored this. "Your fever has not returned, but your inflammatory markers remain elevated. We're administering targeted immunosuppressants tonight." Kayden leaned back. "Will that mess with my gut flora?" Veteran blinked. "Explain." "Sometimes strong meds knock out helpful bacteria. Leads to all sorts of fun, bloating, nausea, you name it." "You possess gut symbiotes?" "Everyone does. It's like a microscopic zoo in there." Veteran looked at him with a mixture of professional interest and faint horror. "You coexist with internal microbial colonies? They help digest food, make vitamins, regulate mood. We kind of need them." Veteran made a note on his tablet. "We will adjust the suppressants accordingly. Your physiology continues to violate medical expectations." "That's just being human." At 9:11 p.m., Kayden's room dimmed automatically for rest cycle. He lay back on the inclined couch, sensors still monitoring his vitals. The hum of filtration systems was oddly soothing, like a distant waterfall behind a closed door. He woke at 2:06 a.m. to pressure in his abdomen and a rising nausea. Sitting upright made it worse. He pressed the call button. Seconds later, Kyrell arrived, this time with a small cart trailing behind him. Discomfort? More than that. Kayden swallowed hard. Stomach's not happy, might be the meds. Kyrell extended a diagnostic wand toward his abdomen. It beeped 4 times. "Your intestinal balance has collapsed. You are experiencing a dysbiosis cascade." "Knew it. We must stabilize your microbial population." "How?" "Introducing controlled bacterial cultures orally." "You're giving me probiotics?" "In essence." Kyrell handed him a small vial. Inside, a viscous pale blue liquid churned softly. Kayden sniffed it. It smelled like old yogurt and cold metal. "I miss yogurt," he mumbled, then drank. By morning, the nausea had subsided. His energy was still low, but the fog in his head was lifting. He sat up unassisted, swung his legs over the side of the couch, and stretched until his spine popped. At 8:30 a.m., a new figure entered. Shorter than Veteran, bipedal, wearing a loose tunic with an asymmetrical collar. This one lacked the usual medical stiffness. They moved like someone used to improvising. "You're Kayden," they said. "I'm Rel, behavior specialist." You made a bunch of medics question their entire fever protocol. That gets you flagged." "I didn't mean to upend anything." "Well, you did. So, I'm here to figure out how your species defines emergency and why you seem to treat serious conditions like mild inconveniences. Kayden scratched his arm. We're kind of raised to push through stuff. Capitalism trains you to ignore pain unless it stops you from working. Fascinating, so systemic neglect breeds resilience. More like stubbornness. Rel sat beside him cradling a tablet. When you were walking yesterday, you refused thoracic support. Why? It feels invasive. I'd rather fall over than get jabbed in the chest by a machine that doesn't know how to read sarcasm. You use sarcasm to mask vulnerability? Sometimes, other times, it's just fun. Rel scribbled something, then looked up. Your vitals are stabilizing. Assuming no setbacks, you'll be cleared for communal interaction tomorrow. Communal? We have other humans aboard, recovered from unrelated events. We thought isolation might be worsening your stress response. There are others? Kayden sat up straighter. You just forgot to mention that? Not forgotten, delayed. We didn't expect you to recover this quickly. I didn't either. Rel stood. I'll return after your next cycle. Try not to develop any new symptoms. By late afternoon, Kayden had managed another lap around the corridor without triggering any alarms. The observation chamber was empty this time, and he paused again to stare out at the gas giant, now eclipsing the local star. The light bled around it in a halo of violet and orange. He felt small, but not in a bad way. At 6:45 p.m., he was back in his room, sipping a new broth that actually had detectable flavor. Savory, slightly spicy, something like mushroom and pepper. He didn't ask where it came from. Veteran entered without knocking. You will be cleared for non-medical zones tomorrow morning. Already packed my non-existent bags. You will be observed. Figured. Veteran paused. You are difficult to categorize. Because I had a fever and didn't cry about it? Because you resisted intervention, endured discomfort, and now joke about it. Would it be better if I panicked? No, but we assumed humans were emotionally fragile. Not fragile, just loud. Veteran nodded once. Your microbial colonies appear to be rebuilding. Give them time, they're fighters. The lights dimmed again for rest cycle. Kayden lay back, hands behind his head, staring at the ceiling. Tomorrow he'd meet others, maybe even talk to someone who'd also tried to sleep off the end of the world. He smiled not because he was fine, but because he wasn't alone. At exactly 9 a.m., the door to Kayden's room slid open with a hiss that had become so familiar he barely noticed it anymore. A new attendant stepped in angular frame, eyes like polished brass, and a gait that suggested either chronic impatience or a very tight schedule. They wore a tunic patterned with shifting fractals that never repeated. You're due in communal block 6, they said without introduction. Walk or be conveyed. I'll walk, Kayden said, pulling on the loose, pale slate garments they'd issued him after his vitals finally normalized. If I fall over, you can roll me the rest of the way. The attendant didn't laugh. Unlikely. The corridor floors are not optimized for rolling. The walk to Block 6 took 19 minutes, which Kayden knew because the attendant announced it halfway through, and again when they arrived. The communal area looked more like a botanical research station than a place for recovering patients. Terraced gardens of bioluminescent mosses and low, whispering plants lined the walls, while soft benches curled around shallow pools of still water. The ceiling was open to a filtered view of a nebula outside, dusted in green and copper hues. There were 5 people already present, 3 humans, 2 aliens. One of the humans was sitting on the ground cross-legged, deep in conversation with a squat, violet creature that resembled a walking anemone. Another was slowly guiding a drone to sketch a mural on the wall using only gestures. The third, a woman with a streak of silver through her dark hair, was watching him as he entered, one brow raised. New arrival? She asked. Just cleared for socialization, Kayden said. I was the fever guy. Oh, that one, she patted the bench beside her. I'm Mara, sit. They probably want us to exchange traumas politely. Kayden sat. I'm not sure mine qualifies as trauma, more of a miscommunication between species. Isn't that everything on this ship? Mara gestured around. "I've been here 3 weeks. Caught a fungal respiratory infection from a terrarium exhibit. They didn't realize it was airborne to humans until I started coughing up green." "Did they panic?" "They tried to quarantine the entire deck. I was stuck in a negative pressure bubble for 4 days." "You?" "Fever. They assembled a 3-person team and a cooling suit. I asked for a blanket." Mara laughed, a dry, unhurried sound. "You're going to fit in just fine." By 11 a.m., Kayden had met the other 2 humans, a linguist named Carter who had been translating alien lullabies before accidentally ingesting a sleep-inducing enzyme, and a geologist named Priya who'd fractured 2 ribs in low gravity after trying to climb a decorative sculpture she assumed was stable. Neither seemed particularly fazed by the idea of being medically misunderstood. "They expect us to function like machines," Carter said, twisting a copper ring around his thumb. "Predictable, programmable. But we're all a bit shoddy, full of workarounds and mental duct tape." "They don't know what to do with people who heal while complaining about it," Priya added, "or people who ignore pain until it becomes a problem with a name." At 1:30 p.m., a meal was served, actual solid food, though it came in cubes and spheres. Still, it had texture. Kayden bit into a sphere that tasted vaguely like roasted eggplant and cumin. "This is edible," he said around a second bite. "I'm shocked." "They're trying," Mara said. "We gave them our flavor profiles. They thought bitterness was a malfunction." By 3 p.m., Kayden had joined a group exercise, flexibility movements, adapted for various species. A 6-limbed instructor demonstrated slow, winding sequences that resembled both yoga and interpretive dance. Kayden kept pace until his knee made a noise like a zipper being closed too fast. "Okay," he muttered, easing down onto a padded seat. "That's my body saying, nice try." The instructor approached, all limbs folding in a graceful bow. "You reached your limit with humor, not distress. This is noted." "Yup," Kayden said, stretching his leg out. "That's basically how we cope." At 6 p.m., Veteran arrived in the communal space, flanked by 2 new medical observers. He spotted Kayden immediately and approached with a brisk step. "You have resumed moderate movement, consumed varied nutrition, and remained conscious for over 12 continuous hours. Your stabilization appears complete." Kayden gave him a thumbs up. "Told you I'd bounce back." Veteran gestured for the observers to record something. "Your microbiome has rediversified. Your lymphocytes have normalized. You no longer require containment." "Containment? I thought this was recovery." "You misunderstand. You were not contained for safety. You were contained to prevent further psychological stress on the medical team." Kayden blinked. "You mean my fever stressed you out?" "It disrupted 6 protocols and prompted a review of xenomedical thresholds." "Well," Kayden said, "glad I could contribute, accidentally." At 7:45 p.m., the group gathered by the central pool, where a projection began to display a rotating map of nearby planetary systems. It was a session designed to reacclimate patients to orientation in space after prolonged confinement. "Anyone ever feel like we're just very elaborate lab rats?" Carter asked, watching a comet tail spiral across the projection. "I've felt like a lab rat since middle school," Priya replied. "At least here they feed us." As the projection shifted, Mara leaned closer to Kayden. "You're not planning to stay long, are you?" "I think I'm cleared for departure tomorrow," he said. "Transport back to Earth Outpost, assuming no one sneezes on me before then." "Good. You've got that about to crawl out of his skin energy." "I'm not built for this much monitoring." "None of us are." At 9 p.m., the communal lights dimmed. Kayden stood, stretched carefully, and looked toward the corridor that would take him back to his quarters. Mara raised a hand in farewell. "Sleep hard, you earned it." Back in his room, Kayden packed the few items he'd been issued, nothing sentimental, all sterilized. He sat on the edge of the sleeping platform, staring at the soft glow of the wall console. The door opened once more. Veteran entered, alone this time. "You leave in the morning," he said. "Yeah, seems like I didn't break anything else today." "There is one matter left, a report. We must file a psychological summary." Kayden raised an eyebrow. "Am I a case study now?" "You are a data point, a disruptive one. Your resilience was not anticipated. Resilience is just the human version of stubbornness. That is not quantifiable. Neither is instinct, or sarcasm, or multitasking while half asleep. Veteran tapped his tablet once. Would you consent to contributing a statement? Sure. Want it poetic or clinical? Informal, authentic. Kayden leaned back. Okay, here's my statement. Humans don't always know when they're in trouble. Sometimes that saves us. Sometimes it doesn't. But we don't give up just because something hurts. Pain's part of the equation. We just solve around it. Veteran nodded once. The door closed behind him without another word. At 11 p.m., Kayden lay on his side, breathing evenly, the ship's quiet hum folding around him like a weighted blanket. For the first time in days, there was nothing pressing against his chest, no alarms waiting to sound, no unreadable expressions hovering over his bed. He wasn't special, just human. And that was enough. He slept. This time, it worked.